We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
We out here, you know what I'm saying, Midland, Canton right now, you know what I'm saying. I'm with my peeps, man, the family, you know what I'm saying. Chief Batavia, a.k.a. Day-Day. I'm going to say this one time and I ain't going to say it no more. The shit that we doing out here, this as far as this protesting, that's a beautiful thing. These boys we holding up from people on West Florida, that's a beautiful thing, don't get me wrong. But I'm telling you, and what I told you before you put that camera on, we ain't got to mention. I know this information for a reason. What they doing is bringing these National Guards in today. By next week, we will have St. Louis locked down. I'm trying to tell y'all, these protesters that they plant in these neighborhoods, they're going to plant them in Chesterfield, they're going to plant them in Clayton, they're going to plant them in Florida, they're going to plant them in Hazelwood. They're going to have people standing outside that's paid. They're going to walk up to bums, paying them hundreds of dollars to hold a sign to say, free my people, or no fight, no shooting, all this shit. But that shit is propaganda. It's an agenda. They putting you on the hood, and then once you know, in 3 days, it's going to be a big-ass group of people around here. And then next thing you know, it's going to be some troops at the end of that light. They trying to do this so we can get in these cribs. You know what I'm saying? They trying to do this so they can get in our cribs. Obama signed martial law in 2012. The shit finna go down. This is no peace from here, bro. No peace. Get your family, get your loved ones, and love them. This is the heart of America. They chose this state for a reason. Get this agenda, man. This agenda is wrong, man. They planting people in our neighborhoods that look just like us, niggas that's wearing J's and saying go out there and protest. And then they gonna have a nigga shooting the air, and then they gonna have assault rifles shooting at everybody on the block. That's how they do it, and that's how the news gonna present it. Oh, we got shot. They shot at us, and that's what it's gonna look like. Mm-hmm. That's what people gonna believe. That ain't the truth. The agenda is to shut St. Louis down. We the heart of America. Remember that, bro. And, hey, Chief Batavia, man, y'all be easy out here.
Right on, bro.
So.
That was the voice of Jimmy So Ambitious Windbird Boys. It's a video that's gone viral across the internet, and he is from Ferguson, Missouri, and he was prophesying and foreseeing the advent of martial law coming to that area, and for the most part, greater St. Louis. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the potential reality of that. Some of the headlines now that are coming out of Ferguson is that the tensions are slightly abating, that things are cooling down. We're going to have Patrick, the money guy, on in about 25 minutes, and we're going to explore if that is indeed a reality. He is not that far from Ferguson. You're listening to Robert Phoenix, and this is the Friday FARcast. We're going to be spending, I don't know, maybe 90 minutes, 2 hours if we have the time, and we're going to be getting into what's happening in the heart of America. And if you are not within the general proximity of it, either geographically or socioeconomically, then you need to pay attention because it's kind of a big deal. And what we're seeing here is a rollout. It is a rollout of a program that is about the militarization of the police and the what I call Gazification of the United States. It's happening, and it's happening now. And we're witness to all of it. And some of us are not mute witnesses. Obviously, Jimmy's so ambitious. When Bird Boys, 14,000 likes, 65,000 shares on that video. This is the age that we're living in, folks. You can stand on a street corner in Ferguson, Missouri, and you can speak for about 2 minutes. You can come from the heart. You can assess clearly without an agenda what's happening. And in the right place and the right time, you're viral. That's the world we're living in. We are living in a world of instant communication. In a lot of ways, we are all part of a greater neural net, and every single one of you is a node in that net. And does Jimmy have a blog? Does Jimmy have a radio show? Does he have a website? I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what, he had a message, and people heard that message and are spreading that message far and wide because this is a wake-up call. We can go back in time and search, and we can research, and we can define and find out how this has happened, how this has occurred. It all started just days after 9/11. And what's interesting is from an astrological standpoint, we are at the, I think we're at the, it was 2002, so it's the 12-year anniversary of DHS. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, that was established in 2012. So we have, and that was when Jupiter was in Leo. And now we have Jupiter and Leo coming back around again, and what are we seeing? We're seeing this, the end of this cycle of buildup. So there's a concrescence here with the amount of arms, the amount of equipment, the amount of technology that DHS has made available to police at a local level. And it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. And that's just on the physical side of things. You know, I've talked about this before, that the Department of Homeland Security has made funds available to local police departments. And they could use those funds freely. But what they couldn't do is they could not hire people. Talked about this last week, but they could go out and they could buy LRADs, they could buy tanks, they could buy Kevlar, they could buy surface-to-air missiles. I mean, whatever. If it was at a show in Las Vegas and they had the budget for it and they could convince somebody on the force, which is generally pretty easy, that they needed it, they could get it. Now, this is how the psychopathological mind operates. Okay, it's a virus. We talked about this before. Jay Widener and I have talked about this. So let's say you're a local police force and you have this DHS money and you go out and you buy a tank, you go out and you buy a bunch of Kevlar, you go out and you buy some armor-piercing shells, you just kind of go nuts with it, right? Maybe you buy kind of a sophisticated communication system, and you're another community, and your community is about 15 miles away, maybe 20 miles away, and you see the buildup taking place in this other community. And the people in your community, the city council, the mayor, whatever, they're looking at what's taking place, and you're the police chief, and they're saying to you, how come you're not doing this? How come you're not availing yourself to these funds? How come you're not going out and buying and purchasing things that our police force and our first responders might need? What happens if we're in a situation where we have to deal with something larger, some kind of terror threat? Yes, the terror threat, the omnipresent terror threat. What if we have to deal with that and we're not prepared? And these guys have to come over to our community and help us out. How does that make us look?
How does that make us feel? We're less competent. We're less prepared. We can't handle taking care of and protecting our people. Meanwhile, Johnsonville down the road, well, they're ready to go. They're ready to take on ISIS. You see how this works? You see how it works? It's insidious. It gets in, and all it has to do is take root in one place. Just one place. What they should have done is the police union, which unfortunately is not going to do this, they should have just had a major vote, so we're not going to take the money. City to city, state to state, we're not taking the money. Keep the money. Unless you're going to give us the money to hire new people, we don't want it. But of course, people want to get reelected. They want to look good. Hey, look what I did. I got a bunch of money from DHS. Look at all these cool things we have. If anything goes down, we're ready. Now, there's a second phase to this. Second phase. Once you have all these new pieces of equipment, what are you going to do? Do you know how to use them? Do you know how to manage the crowds? Do you know how to manage the chaos, the terror? Well, have no fear, because not only can you buy these new deadly toys, you can go over to Israel and you can get trained. That's right. You can get trained. And not only how to use the stuff, but to spot where potential perps are, how to deal with crowd control, how to use force as a weapon that brings you respect, and on and on and on. So with that, I found a piece from a website called the Electronic Intifada, and it's a pretty interesting piece. The blogger is Ranaya Kalek. She is an independent journalist, and she says that she's reporting on the underclass and marginalized. So she has a lot of stories about Gaza and Palestine. And here's the story. I posted this on Facebook. This is from the 8th of 15th, rather. So this is from last week. And it says, Israeli-trained police occupy Missouri after killing black youth. I'm going to read this to you. Since the killing of 18-year-old Michael Brown by Ferguson police in Missouri last weekend, the people of Ferguson have been subjected to a military-style crackdown by a squadron of local police departments dressed like combat soldiers. This has prompted residents to liken the conditions on the ground in Ferguson to the Israeli military occupation of Palestine. And who can blame them? The dystopian scenes of paramilitary units in camouflage rampaging through the streets of Ferguson, pointing assault rifles at unarmed residents and launching tear gas into people's front yards from behind armored personnel carriers, APCs, could easily be mistaken for a Tuesday afternoon in the occupied West Bank. And it's no coincidence. At least 2 of the 4 law enforcement agencies were deployed in Ferguson up until Thursday evening. The St. Louis County Police Department and St. Louis Police Department received training from Israeli security forces in recent years. Paragraph subhead, brute force. It all started when a yet-to-be-named Ferguson police officer, we know who that is, that's Darren Wilson, by the way, I have information on him, officer killed Michael Brown, an armed black teenager. According to witnesses, Brown was attempting to surrender with his hands up when Ferguson emptied his clip into Brown's body, shooting the teen up to 10 times. Let's just put an asterisk right by that. For hours, police left Brown's lifeless body sprawled in the street uncovered as a growing number of residents gathered nearby demanding answers from authorities. We talked about that last week, Kair and I. That's a psyop, by the way. Now, obviously, they want to get as much forensics as possible. This is a big potential crime scene. There's a lot of implications. I don't want to think they want to leave anything unturned, but at the same time, we also have to begin to look at the length that it's like, let's get as many people to see the body as possible. Remember, Elliot Rodgers' body was moved within minutes, if that was even his body, and most people know my feelings about that. Police responded by deploying K-9 units and riot squads to crush the crowd, predictably inciting a riot which police use to justify more brute force. But the people of Ferguson refuse to submit and have mobilized every single day to demand justice for Brown and end to the racist, undemocratic regime they live under. Okay? Hands up, don't shoot has become their rallying cry, a symbol of Brown in his last moments and what it means to be black in America, where every 28 hours an African American is killed by a self-styled vigilante, security guard, or police officer. Okay? Look, I'm not denying the fact that this is going on, that there is an overuse of force. I don't think it is subject to race. I can point out any number of cases where people who are not African American have been terrorized or brutalized or shot by the police in recent years, and without a lot of penalty on the back end of it. Okay, so this is not just a racial event when it comes to police, although obviously there are cases and instances where it does happen. I'm just telling you, this is endemic of the time we are living in. And I think the most important thing is to look at this from a collective issue and to take race out of it as much as we can, because this is the future of America, and it doesn't matter what your skin color is. So here's what she says. Will we as people rise up like the people of Gaza? Our community may be bombed last night. Will our community be bombed like last night with tear gas? That was a terrorist attack, remarked another Ferguson protester to the Daily Beast. Meanwhile, journalists were manhandled and detained. Police were caught on video deliberately firing tear gas at an Al Jazeera America film crew as they were setting up their equipment. Even elected officials weren't spared. Missouri State Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadell was tear gassed, and St. Louis Alderman Antonio French, documenting the unfolding police repression in Ferguson on social media since just after Brown's murder, was arrested. Okay, we don't know if Brown was murdered. Okay, there has to be due process around this. That's a very loaded statement, and I think as a journalist, I believe it is a reckless statement. Here's the part that we want to get to: cops becoming soldiers. Domestic policing in the U.S. has a long and sordid history rooted in the violent control and subjugation of communities of color. So the police violence directed at the predominantly black residents of Ferguson is nothing new, but the widespread militarization on display in Ferguson is part of a more recent trend that began 3 decades ago with the introduction of the disastrous war on drugs, and dramatically escalated with the war on terror, leading directly to the counterinsurgency like tactics deployed against the people of Ferguson by civilian police officers who more closely resemble combat soldiers in Afghanistan than domestic cops. This cop-to-soldier transformation has been facilitated by the U.S. government through mechanisms like the Pentagon's 1033 or military surplus program, which funnels excess military gear to law enforcement agencies across the country. The program's motto, from warfighter to crime fighter. In 2013 alone, the program showered the U.S. police departments with $450 million worth of military equipment. The St. Louis County law enforcement agencies, including the Ferguson Police Department, participate in this program and have received military-grade rifles, pistols, and night vision equipment in recent years, though it's unclear if the equipment is being used in Ferguson right now. As the New York Times reported in June, the scaling down of U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan means former tools of combat, M16 rifles, grenade launchers, silencers, and more are ending up in the local police departments, often with little public notice. During the Obama administration, according to Pentagon data, the police departments have received tens of thousands of machine guns, nearly 200,000 ammunition magazines, thousands of pieces of camouflage and night vision equipment, and hundreds of silencers, armored cars, and aircraft, the newspaper added. Ferguson police also received money from the Department of Homeland Security as part of a grant program that has doled out billions to U.S. law enforcement agencies to purchase military-style equipment, like the APCs charging through the streets of Ferguson. In the last 5 years alone, Ferguson has received nearly $70 million. Missouri has $70 million in DHS money for law enforcement-related programs. It's a lot of money. While there is a wealth of scholarship on police militarization in the U.S., there has been little to no examination on the way Israel's security apparatus facilitates it. Here we get to the heart of the article. Decades of testing and perfecting methods of domination and control on a captive and disenfranchised Palestinian population has given rise to a booming homeland security industry in Israel that refashions occupation-style repression for use on marginalized populations in other parts of the world, including St. Louis. Under the cover of counterterrorism training, nearly every major police agency in the United States has traveled to Israel for lessons in occupation enforcement, a phenomenon that journalist Max Blumenthal dubbed the Israelification of America's security apparatus. Israeli forces and U.S. police departments are so entrenched that the New York City Police Department has opened a branch in Tel Aviv. In 2011, then St. Louis Police Department Chief Timothy Fitch attended the Anti-Defamation League's National Counterterrorism Seminar, an annual week-long Israeli training camp where U.S. law enforcement executives study firsthand Israel's tactics and strategies directly from senior commanders in the Israel National Police, experts from Israel's intelligence and security services, and Israeli Defense Forces, according to the ADL's website. Until Thursday night, the St. Louis County Police Department appeared to be the largest, most militarized and brutish force operating in Ferguson. St. Louis County Police was scrawled across the side of most of the tactical unit vehicles and appeared on the combat-style uniforms of officers aiming assault rifles at peaceful protesters. The ADL boasts of sending more than 175 senior U.S. law enforcement officials from 100 different agencies to the seminar since 2004. So they've been doing this now for 10 years, taking the lessons they learned in Israel back to the United States. The ADL is just one of several pro-Israel groups forging close ties between U.S. cops and Israel's security and intelligence apparatus. Another is the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, also known as JINSA, a neoconservative think tank that claims to have hosted some 9,500 law enforcement officials in its Law Enforcement Exchange Program, also known as LEAP. Since 2004, LEAP takes delegations of senior law enforcement executives to Israel to study methods and observe techniques used in preventing and reacting to acts of terrorism, and sponsors conferences within the United States, bringing Israeli experts before much larger groups of law enforcement leaders, according to JINSA's brochure. Former St. Louis Police Department Chief Joseph Makwa is listed as having traveled to Israel as part of a LEAP conference in 2008. Following the nationwide outrage and embarrassment, Missouri Governor Jay Nixon pulled the St. Louis County Police Forces out of Ferguson and placed the Missouri Highway Patrol in charge of policing demonstrators. The St. Louis Police Department voluntarily removed its officers from Ferguson. As a result, Ferguson no longer looks like occupied territory, though the underlying issue, Michael Brown's death, has yet to be addressed. Meanwhile, the scope of Israel's influence on law enforcement remains virtually ignored by the media, despite the troubling implications of emulating an apartheid regime actively engaged in ethnic cleansing and war crimes. The culture of racism and the impunity that has long plagued American policing is deadly enough as it is. Adding Israeli-style repression to an already dangerous mix guarantees disaster. Now, this is the heart of what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with an intensification of military-style equipment, tactics, and ideology. And this is what is being transferred to our local police department. Why? Because we are living in the cloud and the specter of terror that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It exists because it is created. Terror is an industry that is created. It's not some kind of rabid, ideological, America-hating, freedom-hating enterprise. Although now I'm sure it has some of that. But whether it's Al-Qaeda, whether it's ISIS, these groups are created. They are created for foment, for fomenting dissent, and they're created for the need to have counter-terror, insurgent, indoctrination and training. That's the way it is. It's like problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem. What's the reaction? The reaction is, oh, we've got to get safer. We need to figure out how the Israelis deal with this. Solution, let's go learn from the Israelis. This is dangerous. This is not what America was founded on. It is not the spirit of America at all. At all. It is the spirit of some other place, some other culture, some other ideology that is being grafted upon us. And it doesn't matter what the country is. It could be Russia. It could be Germany. It could be South Africa. It doesn't matter. We happen to be dealing with one country specifically because of this. And it is changing the face of this country year by year, police department by police department, trip after trip. And now what we're dealing with is a much more, in many cases, violent and rabid response to events like Ferguson. And by the way, again, I want to point out that what we're talking about here, what we're dealing with here, is something that I believe is ultimately transracial. It will go beyond color at some point in time, and we're paying for it. Our tax dollars are paying for all of this, paying for the training, paying for the trips, paying for all of it. We're basically paying to have the security forces of our own invisible prisons watch over us. We're paying for it every step of the way. That is the irony, isn't it? So we're going to bring Patrick, buddy Patrick, on. I don't know if this is him. He said he was going to come on at about 12:30. Let's see if this is Patrick. He's on the ground now, far from Ferguson. Let's see if it's him. Hey, Patrick, is this you?
Yeah, it's me. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. Thanks for being patient, waiting for so long.
Actually, thank you too, because I literally just got my my transaction finished. I was telling you about.
Okay, so I was just trying to lay out the militarization of the police force, which we saw. I think really we saw it actually during the Boston Marathon, although people weren't paying attention. But we're really seeing it in St. Louis and Ferguson. And I was just, going over some of those details and how and why it's happened and potentially where this is going. But let's get to the present. Let's get to the chase. I want to find out what your take on all this is and some of the latest developments that you've been seeing and experiencing in and around that area.
Well, I happened to actually catch the first half hour, so I heard you, and I actually liked how you opened up with that Facebook feed from that gentleman who laid it out there. Today, right now, it's a lot quieter. Actually, that's what we've been talking about today is the eerie quiet going on. We're going to get some 99-degree weather this weekend at 100% humidity, so I'm curious if that's going to act like a powder keg, because you know how heat and humidity typically things escalate in the crime world.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's a lot quieter now. I think the fact that that gentleman, Darren, recanted his story has basically deflated the entire story. It's the way it's feeling right now. So I don't know, are you aware of that? I think it was on Wednesday night or Thursday.
So what's the latest?
Well, Darren is the guy that was allegedly with him when it happened, Mr. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one that came on, I think it was Tuesday, with the original story. Well, at first he said he was hiding behind cars, and then it was said that, he witnessed the cop do this, and he articulated the events, and that's when everyone kind of lost it at that point.
Right.
Well, he came back and basically said, Mr. Brown was bum rushing the cop.
Well,
so it just kind of destroys that hands-up story, which ultimately I think was the linchpin to the emotional draw that this event had. It was all centered around a man on his knees with his hands up in the air.
Right.
That's been the symbol for the protest It's just not true.
Right.
So what happened, I don't really think a whole lot of us are ever going to know, truly. And we all sensed that immediately, at least in the local community. It didn't even take, I want to say it was Tuesday or Monday, because the event happened on Friday or Saturday. I honestly didn't even pay attention to this when it first happened. Truly, it was just another story of, you know, like, wow, that's really messed up. But it wasn't the story it became at first. So it was, I think it was Tuesday, whenever, you know, they finally, it got out of control. People started talking on the streets, though, already about out-of-towners doing it. Like, we knew it wasn't the community looting the community. And then it took an entire week, and it was earlier this week, I believe Monday or Tuesday, McCaskill finally called it out. Jay Nixon, I loved, called it out right away. And he flat said, I think it was on last Friday, he basically alluded to the fact that it was out-of-town people doing it, and he didn't name names. Then later on we find out it's Chicago, New York. They were busing people in. It was, who paid for the buses? Who paid for the hotel? I'm like, who's paying for this?
Right.
You know, that's what I'm most curious about when it comes to that angle. But we knew it wasn't us doing it, so to speak.
Let's stop there just for a second, all right? Because this is where it gets into some very murky territory.
Absolutely.
So if they're coming out of Chicago and they're coming on buses, we all know who comes from Chicago.
Yeah, I know.
Okay? We all know or at least most of us know, that have been studying these tactics for a while, that this is pure Alinsky 101. You bring people in. You basically catalyze the situation, and it doesn't matter, according to Alinsky, what the agenda is or what the issue is. You freeze it, right? You get attention on it, and then you create polarization. This is the linchpin, the cornerstone to Saul Alinsky's tactics. Saul Alinsky, of course, being from Chicago. Now, this, by the way, if this is the case, then this really brings up some very troubling questions.
The real quick, since we're on Chicago, first off, no offense to Chicago, but doesn't this happen a little bit more there? And, I mean, not to say that a cop shooting an innocent person, you know, the way, but generally speaking, there's a lot more of this going on in Chicago in his own backyard, yet St. Louis gets all the credit. Or, you know what I mean? This became a huge story. And actually, the way that
place in the country, yeah.
What was the name of that gentleman in the very beginning? I didn't catch his name. The Facebook guy.
Oh, his name is Jimmy So Ambitious.
Jimmy. So
Jimmy So Ambitious, win Bird Boys.
Well, it's kind of funny though, because ultimately, the way it all goes down, a guy like that is aware enough to know what's really going on. And the parts that he gets to about the heartland, that's kind of where I've been at this whole time. I think like Darren. I don't know if Darren's a true St. The guy that originally was with Mr. Brown. I don't know if he's really from St. Louis. I don't know that. I know that based on his interview, he was at least coached, because you don't speak on events as at no time did this happen, at no time did that happen, at that time he did. That's courtroom speak. That's how a cop speaks in a courtroom. Okay, that right there was a giveaway.
Yeah.
Okay? The thing I said, though, was it is funny how this is the heartland. Like, this is what they call this area. This is the heartland.
That's right.
And this is where they would do this. If Darren is from St. Louis, and generally, I don't think he may have had the heart to keep lying. And that's why he knew that the community being destroyed as it was, if he's really from it, he probably honestly felt intense guilt over a simple lie.
Mm-hmm.
And to go along with people that were, you know, coercing him or putting a lot of pressure on him to do that. But at the end of the day, it took him a week, and he said, I can't do this anymore. I don't have the heart for this, is how I took it. And I think, generally speaking,
I think that's a great analogy, because, you know, we're talking about a metaphysical and a metaphorical heart, and certainly what St. Louis and Ferguson was experiencing was literally a heart attack.
Yeah, exactly. I said that too.
That's what it was. It was a heart attack. And if you want to implant a meme, or you want to implant some kind of, psychological trope, then you go right into the heartland. You make a statement, you drive a statement into it. And it's like, this is it. Be afraid, be very afraid, because this is, the model for your future. So you better, wake up here. It's coming. If it can come here to the heartland of America, it can come to anywhere.
And the interesting thing is how you were saying, in all reality, Boston was I suppose you could say Boston is the first rollout of that militarized police force. And like you said, no one really noticed. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, we know based on international, talking or conversations happening, that's not the case anymore, for one. Two, only due to my background, I was raised as a cop's son. So, I have a lot of law enforcement background experience from the ground up. These guys, and I'm just going to talk broadly, they are talking. They are talking. And a lot of it has to do with, especially the military guys, and especially the younger ones that have just been through the Afghanistan and Iraq. And I think it's in the mainstream now, too. Like, the police forces are better armed than what we're sending our militaries into. And we're supposed to be, and that's where the terrorist threat is supposed to be the most concentrated, and yet we're sending guys in with less equipment than our own police force. My dad had a great question, and I'd be curious to see, what you or the audience thinks about this. My dad said, okay, what do we need rubber bullets for? What happened to the water cannon? You don't want to get hit with a rubber bullet. You don't want to get hit with a taser. You don't want to get hit with a bullet. Like, if this is supposed to be, crowd management and we want them to disperse, water works pretty dang well.
That's what they use.
What happened?
That's what they use in Europe. Well, the water cannon is being replaced by the LRAD, right?
I'm not familiar with that one.
The LRAD is basically it's a microwave on wheels. And they're able to, no, and some of these police forces have LRADs, and so what they can do is they can focus and concentrate a kind of a tight spectrum microwave transmission into a certain area, and your skin begins to burn. And let's face it, an LRAD costs more money than a water cannon.
Yeah.
And so and by doing that, right, by it costing more money, you get into the tax base. There's manufacturing. There's companies that are involved. It's an industry. This is the new American industry. It is security. Ever since 9/11 and ever since the crash of 2009, it has been all about building up security, because ultimately people are going to say we've had enough. So that's one. But the other is that there's just huge amounts of money in security now. So,
the security, though, the funny thing is this is showing a glaring inconsistency, though, in that claim, only in the fact that they didn't protect the people. They didn't protect the businesses. They let all that happen. And that gets into the nature of what was really going on.
That's right.
In terms of the dual levels. Because, see, I think the behavior of our local people is actually speaking to they're not involved. Right. I think that I don't really know how the initial events transpire. I do know just two basic facts that absolutely stun me, one of which is that the police officer is never in contact with his dispatch at Ferguson, and that they never had a record of this incident happening on the police scanners themselves. Can you please tell me what police shooting happens and the dispatch is not a part of it? It did happen quickly. I will give you that. It did happen in an instant moment. Yet I'm telling you, the protocol is real simple. That man, as a valid peace officer, is going to call it in as soon as he has a moment, because he's going to want backup.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The dispatchers wound up getting dispatched based on the news reporting it before the police knew about it. How do the news know about this before the police do, and their own shooting and their own officer involved? Are you kidding me?
That raises a number of questions. Like, did they know ahead of time, number one? That's the most cynical and paranoid. Number two, were they so tied into some kind of social media piece that they got it quicker than the police? So what do you
supposedly, think? Yeah. Supposedly originally they were getting bystanders calling in, which is going to be a very common pattern we're going to find. There's bystanders calling, but that's the point. There's a third party. Let's just leave it at that little phrase. There's a third party that is claiming an event going on, not the original man involved.
Right.
And through those parties, you're probably right. Through those parties, I'm sure they're probably on Facebook and social media. At the same time, they're calling the dispatch, because the dispatch, they got recordings out there on YouTube, and I've got a few where they're telling the people calling in, we don't have a record of this. We don't have anything going on. What are you talking about? And then the news starts jumping on after those people started calling. So you very well may be right. The bigger thing, though, is it's the exact same pattern at that Ferguson market. See, I don't know if you noticed, it came out today. I read it this morning, but it might have been posted yesterday. Allegedly, the video actually has a June 9th timestamp. So they got the day right. They're off on the wrong month. The reason that Ferguson market guy didn't call the police is because nothing happened. Right. That's why he's so desperately trying to distance himself from the local community to tell people, I'm not involved in this. I don't know how I got involved in this, but I'm not involved in it.
When you say the Ferguson market, that's the video where Michael Brown is stealing the cigars. Is that right?
That is the alleged video connected to it.
Okay, so so initially they were trying to tie that cigar event to what happened in August.
Yes.
Okay. So the question is, why was he pulled over or detained on this go-round, and what led to the altercation between he and Officer Wilson?
Right. And that's the thing. I don't think we're going to know. We're going to give you given a version of events, sure. But the truth of the matter, it is so wonderfully murky. You know, you look in the mirror and all you see is haze. I mean, you can't make it out yet. You can't make it out. But my whole thing is those two facts. I mean, it's a third party making a call about these things. It's not the people that are supposed to be involved. You've got the story changing from Darren. You've got there's something else I'm forgetting too. But I mean, all of this taken together, it's not what we thought it was. It just isn't, and that's why I'm saying now it just feels like the life's been taken out of it, so to speak. I mean, it's eerily quiet right now. And that's what everyone's talking about.
Isn't that interesting how one sort of admission of truth can just deflate everything in a matter of... It's incredible. Telling you, truth is a powerful, powerful weapon. And
what else happened in the last couple of days? What's happened in the last couple of days is this has started to die out. That whole ISIS thing is now, that thing has been turned on full blast in the last 3 to 5 days.
Right.
I mean, you got Hagel now coming out yesterday. I think it was yesterday that he came out and said ISIS is the biggest threat to America. We're worried about cities. This morning on Drudge, they're saying, of all places, Chicago is being targeted.
Interesting.
Going back to Chicago.
Right. So so now they want to bring ISIS home, and of course one of the big stories is that the guy who is the head of ISIS, Abu, what's his name? When they let him out of the prison camp, I think it might have been in Afghanistan. He turned. These are the words that apparently he used. He turned and he said, "I'm coming to New York." That's what he said. Now, this is a guy that has met, by the way, with John McCain. There are pictures of him with John McCain. He's basically been put into place by the United States and the Mossad and MI6 as the new Al-Qaeda. That's what they wanted. They wanted the new Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, of course, has no ideological or leadership since Osama bin Laden. Whenever that happened with bin Laden, and I think it happened closer to probably around 2005, but there's no leadership with Al-Qaeda, so they need to create a new group, and now they have this ISIS. And they're now saying that there are at least 100 Americans working with ISIS. They've said that overseas, that they're fighting with ISIS. So, now we have this thought in our heads, in our collective minds, that one of those 100 guys could be walking amongst us, right? And they don't have to look like they're from the Middle East or they're Saudi Arabian or whatever. They could be just as white as me and you. So now we have another, introduction of a new threat, more security, more money. We're in this vicious cycle. And you're right. It started, to go on full blast as Ferguson began to kind of scale down in terms of its, media noise.
Well, the biggest thing I noticed in terms of that right there and trying to keep this thing alive was the weekday chief piece. The funny thing was the very night that happened, because my background as a police officer's son, and I grew up in the South for 5 years as well, I had a lot of black friends. I still do. I'm a white guy in case nobody knows. I felt like genuinely positioned to go down there and speak to both sides. Because this is my thing. And this segues perfectly into what you're getting at with the security need, and we need to hype up and spend more money and arm deeper, harder, whatever. Okay, here's the deal. The cops didn't stop any looting. The cops didn't stop any of the violence at the end of the day. They didn't protect anybody. Okay? They didn't protect business. They didn't protect people. The people had to do that for themselves. The business owners had to arm themselves and go stand in front of their businesses all night with their buddies. That's the only way that they stopped the looting in their particular store.
That's
so
right.
The cops didn't do anything. This was my thing. This I was telling my dad. I was kind of like, hey, what do you think about it? What would happen if a guy showed up and did this? I said, if I went down there, it would be better if it was organic and it was an actual Ferguson community member. This is my community. This is exactly how I'm responding to this. I'm going to go to that line of police officers, which that's another problem right there. Just like you were saying earlier, the polarizing forces, and that's what you do is you freeze this and you polarize it. So that's the whole point. The fact that they're standing in a line forces the other group of people to stand in a line, if you will.
That's
and that
right
there, it's like, come on, man. You can intermingle. You could walk around. You could do this in so many different ways, but you choose to create a line over here, and there's nothing else to do but get another line over here. Ultimately, right. I would have went over those police. I would have asked for the captain or whoever it was in command, and I would have said, listen, I'm going to do a bunch of citizen arrests. I got me and 12, 13 guys. We're going to go around. We're going to videotape the entire thing, and every man we see breaking into a building, business, etc., we're going to arrest them. I need a dozen set of zip-tie cuffs because I'm going to be bringing them back to you for paperwork. Are you ready for that? Can we do that? Can you help us do that? That's what I would have done. And I would have went around and got these people. I mean, seriously. We can't depend on these guys to do it for us. And I think that's the greater reality of the age and the astrological time we're moving into is it's coming down to self. It's coming down to you worrying about yourself and the ones around you closest that are going to be there for you. Because this isn't going to get any easier.
That's right.
It's not. That's just the time we're in.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, and I think a lot of people, or more people, let's just say more and more people are beginning to think along those lines. And I just remember when Katrina took place, and there was such a visceral and heartfelt response from the rest of America. Like you had first responders getting in their fire trucks from Boston,
just going down there, yeah.
Going down to Louisiana and being turned away by FEMA and, guys with guns basically saying, we don't need you, get out of here. And I think that has been the overall ideology since then. And it's like, we will take care of this. It's really about we are the Uber parent, and we don't trust you to take care of yourself. And we don't want you to do that. Go off and live your life and put, just trust us to take care of everything. And that mentality is completely disempowering. I mean, if you go back in time, and this is one of the things I've talked about before, if you go back in time, let's say 300 years ago, maybe even further back than that. Let's go 500 years ago. One of the most important things was for a man and a family to make sure that their resources, whatever they were, the home, the fields, the grains, the sort, that they were secure. And the man's duty at that time, and mostly the men, was to offer up some form of security, some form of protection. The ability to, walk the property at night, or make sure that you were connected to your neighbors and you got each other's back in case something happened. And that was put on the individual. There was no agency. There was no law enforcement division at that time to take care of that stuff. It was up to you and me. And what happened is that you had people like the Pinkertons, and you had the rise of the banks. And when you had the rise of the banks and the rise of the banking class, you also had the rise of law enforcement, because they were there to protect their interests, right, and not necessarily the people's interests. That came a little bit later. Law enforcement was about protecting the banks. It wasn't about protecting the people. You watch any of those TV shows, those Westerns, what are they there for? They're there to protect the banks. So what happens is that, over time, we get lulled into this sort of position where we're always handing over our authority because somebody else is taking care of it. And now, 500 years later, it's completely atrophied. And we have become a society where when we do decide that we're going to take something into our own hands, or we're going to watch and protect our assets, it almost appears as if it looks very extreme based on what's happening in the current milieu. So, and in reality, it's just a natural response of being a human, right? You have your gun and you protect your storefront. That's just a natural response. But because of the way things have been wired and set up, it looks extreme, and it will sound off bells in people's consciousness. So I think you're absolutely right, and we need more of that. We need more of a sense of self-authority around these things.
Which, it kind of, you look on TV and you see those prepper movements, and you see all kinds of, people have probably been hearing about self-reliance for a while. It's been out there, so it's not new. The funny thing, though, when you were talking about, in the old days, and authority, they had authority. And America was a unique experiment in authority, because it gave it all to a certain class of people. And that's actually part of the problem, though, because it only actually at the time recognized white landowners. So you fast forward to the Civil War and the attempts to correct it via the 14th Amendment and to grant, a blanket status to bring in black people into equality, if you will. But over time, because of a bankruptcy, we're all now basically back there, but we can't even see our own prison walls, if you will.
No, it's true.
I just saw this movie, and I won't quote it too big, but there's that movie out there that God Is Not Dead, which I haven't wanted to watch it. I had no interest in it, but something about it, I'm like, you know what? Let me see what this is. And there's a scene in there, and it just stuck with me. And it's this senile woman with dementia. And Dean Cain plays a bad man in that movie. And he asks her, now mind you, she's got dementia, and he's like, I don't even know why I'm here. And he's just talking out loud. He's like, I don't understand how me being one of the meanest people I know, my life's easy. And it's a God movie, so she gets into, the devil makes it real easy for those that don't want to follow the truth. Makes it real comfortable. For the rest of us that want to stand up, it's a lot harder. So you don't see your prison walls until the doors close. The rest of us see the walls. Is basically what she's saying. And so it's so interesting because you look at today, and this is what a lot of me and my friends talk about, everything at the end of the day is controlled by paper. One of the interesting things that I found interesting, only because of my unique views, was the executive order that brought the National Guard in.
Right.
it was posted online. I had a copy of it really quick. And it's just interesting to me how, you know, they use certain words and they use certain stylings to names, and they also sign in 2 different color inks. And that's the thing. At the end of the day, we've got this dual system. It is duality to a degree, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But there is a system that we've all been playing in that's really kind of make-believe.
That's right.
And the make-believe system is controlling the real world.
Yeah.
And that's what I find now to be the underlying message, theme, and symbols of a lot of those old movies and a lot of stuff even, you know, today. Where it's like we're living in a world of make-believe, and we think it's real. Like you get into Alice in Wonderland. That's our world. Like we're into these titles, and you know, how is it? The man. Okay, coming back to Ferguson for a bit. The man that got caught on video saying that he was going to effing kill the man that was recording him. You know what I'm talking about?
I have not seen that.
Oh man, this happened. I want to say Tuesday or Wednesday, down at the protest. A police officer was filmed with a gun in a guy's face saying, "Get that camera out of my face or I'm going to effing kill you." That's what he said. It's on camera, and I think it was broadcast live or it was immediately uploaded. But immediately it got out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's on suspension now, pending investigation, and I've seen a few articles out there, and at the end of the day, is it okay, guys, for a man to put on some colored clothes, which if you get into gangs and you know about gangs, they wear colored clothes too to identify themselves. So some men put on some colored clothes, and they're allowed to stick guns and make felonious threats, and they don't get arrested. They don't get – this isn't about a suspension. You know what I mean? This is about a dual standard that I'm trying to get at, like where there's 2 different worlds you're living in, if you will, the one that's controlling the other.
Right. Right. Well, that's true.
It's crazy where we're at right now.
It is. And these worlds seem to be getting further and further apart in many ways. And I guess in some ways it's good. I mean, if we can establish that there is a world of illusion and then there's a world of truth, and our goal, our job is to continue to move closer to the world of truth and further away from the world of illusion, then this duality piece, I guess, serves a purpose, right? But I was thinking
about how I see it.
Yeah. But I've been thinking about Obama lately, and I think it might have been Chris Glover who started talking about John Teeter over on Facebook. And, you know, I think we were pretty close to the John Teeter timeline. By the way, I do believe John Teeter was a real person. And I do think he time traveled. And I think that his knowledge of CERN is the one thing that really kind of tipped it off when he was doing those posts back in 1990. You know Teeter, right, Patrick? I don't. No, I don't. I think you might have mentioned him one time to me before. I never did finish looking into it.
So let me just kind of lay it out. John Teeter, an interesting phenomena, showed up around 1999. And he was on the internet, and he was in chat rooms, and he was basically telling people that he was from the future. And it was very compelling stuff. And he actually provided some pictures, and he talked about how he was able to basically move backwards in time. And he went backwards in time into a couple of different years. He went backwards into the 1970s to get an IBM computer that he had to take into the future because this IBM computer could run all kinds of different code. And because of what happened during what was known as the American Civil War, a lot of these computers got destroyed, and they were pretty much rebuilding their society. And he wound up becoming a freedom fighter. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Florida, where he was, where the young John Teeter became part of what he called the shotgun unit. But what was really interesting about Teeter is he talked about some of the events leading up to the American Civil War, and he talks about a president who tried to emulate himself like Lincoln and be the great uniter, right? And I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about how Obama has been tapping into Lincoln, you know, all along. Ever since I think he used the same Bible that Lincoln used to swear himself in the first go round. So he's been planning that Lincoln real estate in his legacy for a long time, and I think whether it is intentional or part of this vector that he's in, that he sees himself as being somebody. Now, a lot of people think he's a puppet, and I think that there's some change there, but I also think he probably has a vision for himself. And I think the vision he has is he's going to bring everybody together. But in order to bring everybody together, you have to have a wide enough division. And so what we have here is we have more and more of these instances where, whether it's Trayvon Martin or whether it's Michael Brown, that the whole quote-unquote race issue gets exacerbated. And it's like sticking, it's like poking at a dog with a pointed stick. And after a while, the dog is just gonna bark. It's gonna snap. It's gonna come after you. And it doesn't matter which side that is. And so I think what we're seeing here is this movement to create more of a fractured society with kind of an insane sort of psychological attempt to bring it closer together and heal it through some kind of final solution, whether it's a civil war. I'm not sure what it looks like, but that's what it feels like to me. And this is kind of moving along the teeter line, or teetering on the teeter line. But what I think is going to happen is that, and this is my hope, is that it doesn't matter what color you are, what stripe you are, people will wake up and they will see the manipulation that's taking place. And in which case it won't be black against white or brown or yellow or whatever the color is, but people will clearly see that our future is stark, and that jobs are going to become lesser and lesser, and that because of emerging technologies and other foreign markets, and that the security industry will become the de facto industry for this country, which means that more and more people will be under surveillance. They'll be, it's just going to get heavier and heavier. So I think people are finally starting to wake up to this, and I hope we can wake up to it in a way that is obviously peaceful, and we can have some kind of democratic process around this. Although I'm not entirely hopeful about that. So I think we're kind of in that teeter timeline, and it just occurred to me that when he talked about this president who was like Lincoln, it triggered to me that this is definitely Obama.
Well, that's kind of funny too, because looking on it, it's like the only thing keeping it going is the same people that are supposedly doing the protecting. Right. Just like Jimmy said, it's guys getting paid to start this stuff. Here we got peace achieved, and the very next night they released that video to get everybody going again. Like, it was just so obvious.
Yeah. Well, we had Kair on last week, and we talked about Al Sharpton. And, Al Sharpton is an agent provocateur. That's what he does. Mm-hmm. That's his role. He's a shit disturber. He's a professional shit disturber. He's an FBI informant. And most of the people in the black community know this.
Yeah, they do.
And how they can actually allow this guy to represent their interests from this moment forward is beyond me. Now, I do know that apparently Jesse Jackson was on stage.
I heard about this. He got booed.
And he got booed off.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why they booed him off. Was his message unity? I don't know what his message was, but his act wasn't working.
Well, part of it, too, I think, was money. So from what I heard at the very end of that thing, he was asking for donations and stuff, and I think that's when it got triggered, and everyone's like, what? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I think the timeline thing's interesting. I mean, you go to Edgar Casey, he had something similar, to that. Because I think he was saying, too, that a black president would be the last president of America, or the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that deep-seated, I don't even call it the negative timeline, if you will, or however you want to look at it. I don't know, man. I don't resonate with that. I mean, granted, I come from a different cloth, but it just seems like with given enough time, and I think maybe that's what it is, it's time. Like, there's a certain gut instinct that I know we all have, but at the same time, there's also that heart, man, and and I just learned it this way, actually, a few days ago, but, like, the heart just knows.
Right.
The mind tries to understand.
Yeah.
But the heart just knows. And so anything like this that they're perpetrating, it's like you put that in your heart and you weigh it, and it's like the video with the guy that allegedly got beheaded.
Yeah.
Okay? I got the basic question. Where's all the blood around the body?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, come on. I mean, it's just like, okay.
So you're talking about James Foley, the journalist. Yeah, it's, again.
I mean, look at the face versus the body.
Yeah.
Like, look at that head, and then look at the skin. Where's the hair? Where's the hair on this guy?
Yeah.
They shave it all off. It's white. His body is white. He's in a desert, but his face is tan. Like, it's just like, come on, guys.
Yeah. No,
I think things are happening so fast now, and they've got like a B team working on a lot of this stuff. I think there is actually so much infighting going on. They are losing key guys to each other. And where we're at now is it's the speed of everything, the tempo has gone up. And I told you in an email, like, it feels like time's actually moving backwards sometimes. The way events are transpiring, but it's almost like the reverse of, like Mark Twain used to say, history rhymes. And it's like, yeah, it's rhyming, and it's backwards rhyming. Like, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, that could be a very fascinating subject to cover, which would be the temporal flux of time and where it is moving or not moving, and that we could spend a whole show on that.
Well, you remember who was in the temporal flux was that Denver guy with the movie theater deal.
Yeah, the Aurora.
He was all into temporal. Another thing I just remembered this. Also keep in mind, folks, that where this event's transpiring in Ferguson is literally 3 exits on an interstate from where they did military drills in the city of St. Louis.
Interesting. And how long ago was that?
Which was 2 years ago. It's 2 years. I believe it was 2 summers ago. Yeah. It was the summer of 2012, I believe it was, where they did I think it was a weekend or a couple of days of rolling down streets in tanks. And I remember at the time, like, you have got to be kidding me. And so it was really interesting because when the events first broke out and the rioting first broke out on that weekend after it happened, someone posted on the internet a photo, and they alleged the tanks were coming. And it was like a week and a half too early, because they had a photo that allegedly was tanks on Eve Bridge, which is a bridge that connects Illinois and Missouri. And within about 5 hours of the Twitter feeds, everyone was like, "Wait a second, that tank thing is not happening." And they said all they said was it was a rumor. And it was like, where did you get the photos from then? But then a week later, it happened. And then, like I said, this is literally, maybe 2 miles west, maybe 2.5 miles west of where they conducted training exercises of something really close to this.
Interesting.
But I don't know. How many coincidences do you need before you have a pattern? Are we ready to talk patterns? You know what I mean? And I think that's where it's at. They've done it so much now, though. I don't know. I'm not into creating this type of fakery, but don't you guys have a different pattern you can try? Because this one here is getting really worn out. And
that's just it. I mean, that's just it. There are combinations of these things that they can only run out so many times.
So many iterations, right.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's a good thing for us because we can have some pattern recognition. Now, James, I believe it's James Casey. Is that the guy that was beheaded, theoretically, by ISIS?
Just a day or two ago, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's his name. When I didn't watch the beheading, to be honest with you, but when I heard about it, first thing that popped into my mind is how can we trust this?
Right.
How can we trust what our eyes are seeing or theoretically seeing? Because we can't. I think we've come to this point where if we're good enough, we hold back and we suspend our judgment a little bit. And we're just not sucked into these events. It only takes 2 or 3 times, and it's happened to me. I've bought some stuff hook, line, and sinker, and after that, I'm like, oh, let me just step back here a little bit. Let's let this play out here for the next, couple of days. I mean, I think that there are 2 types of events that really merit attention. One is like an organic event. It's happening, and you want to watch the sort of news feed in real time within the first half an hour to 45 minutes, because that's important. You can find discrepancies, inconsistencies, inaccuracies, and bang, the first hour on something is vital. Like, you go back in time and watch what happens with Princess Diana. The first, reports of Princess Diana was that she was able to actually get out of the car on her own power. She walked into the ambulance and drove away in the ambulance. And then immediately, within the next couple hours, that report is scrubbed. And, she's in the hospital. She's suffered severe injuries, and she winds up dying in the hospital. Right. So, but what happened with that, with the first report? Generally, that's when the real stuff comes through. Then there is the other reports that are not necessarily organic and real and are staged. And then, and at that point, you just step back and you say, well, what's really happening here? What's going on? And for people that are, turned on like yourself and, have the ability to discern and kind of look at, well, where is the blood? I don't see any blood. It's like with Elliot Rodger. Where was the blood? There was no blood. You would think that a guy that had been shot up to that, and the human body is like a water balloon.
Yeah, 60% water.
Yeah, and you start punching
holes
holes in the human body, there's going to be evidence of that. You behead somebody, and there's going to be, veins and arteries flopping all over the place, spurting out blood like it's a sprinkler, like it's a garden hose. And if you can't make those connections with those events, then you have to ask, well, what's really gone on here? And the problem is that most people have very little grounding as to how the body actually operates. Because when something does happen, something traumatic does happen to the body, it's messy. It's really messy. So, obviously, you were able to kind of look at it and say, where is the blood? A lot of these events, like even Columbine. If you go back and look at Columbine for everything that happened.
No, there's actually a very good video on this thing that breaks that down. It's like an hour. That was one of the first drills, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Where's the blood?
Yeah.
Even
and then they had dummies. They had dummies too. The officers were throwing dummies around that were supposed to be bodies.
Yeah. So most of these traumatic events are being managed. They're being managed. And here we have a situation. I was having an interesting conversation yesterday with Gloria, who's been on the show, and she has her essential oils business, and she's a pretty, I think, powerful channel. And we were talking about possession. And we're talking about specifically with Michael Brown. By the way, it's interesting that the head of FEMA, the guy that kept people out of Katrina, his name was Mike Brown. I know it's a coincidence, but it's interesting, right? So anyway, we were talking about Michael Brown, and one of the things that I'd noticed that almost every picture I had seen of him, he looked stoned out of his head, right? So now I'm thinking, okay, that he's smoking a lot of weed, and obviously he went into that store to get the Swisher Sweets so he could, pack them and have his big fat blunt. So then we started to talk about the quality of marijuana these days, and I am of the mindset that the marijuana that's being created, grown, genetically altered, modified, whatever, is very different than the stuff that I smoked when I was a kid. And I would venture that they are lacing or putting things or genetically modifying the cannabis in such a way that it is distorting people and punching holes in their aura. Because we were talking about Michael Brown being possessed, and that there is this, this phenomenon where people can actually have a possession experience. I mean, some of these zombie people that run around tearing people's faces off. I mean, those people are possessed. I mean, whether they smoke bath salts or bed bugs, I don't know what they did, but it's clear that they're possessed. And so we were talking about Michael Brown as a kind of a form of demonic possession in that moment. Was it triggered by satanic skunk? I don't know, but now we have something in play. We have a kid who may have been high out of his mind, and all of a sudden there's some level of subconscious permission or some interdimensional thing comes into him, and now all of a sudden there's a conflict at hand, and the conflict ensues, and then bang, these guys are on the street, they're ready to react, they're ready to respond, they're ready to kick it up a notch, and then see where they can take this thing. That's what it feels like to me.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I would tend to, actually, I'd separate this a little, though. I would say that the reason, and from what I understand, the legalization and decriminalization of cannabis happening is ultimately there's a GMO agenda behind it. They're hoping to, do the pharmacy angle through genetically modified cannabis strains. Yeah. That I could get with what you're saying. I think the bigger issue, generally speaking, though, are prescription drugs before an altered strain of cannabis, at least today. Everything that I know about, when the Netherlands did what they did when they legalized it, it created the biggest research industry over there. They figured out, they used Mendel. Remember Mendel, I believe it was, we learned in science, that did the crossbreeding for strong and weak, or regressive and dominant genes or whatever.
I think it was peas or beans or whatever it was, yeah.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, that's all it is here. And over time, they've had decades to actually do this stuff. So they got, that, and when you can control the environment 100%, you can do crazy things. So I would agree with you, man. The stuff today is a lot different. So, but ultimately, I think SSRIs and all these friggin' prescription medications, I think that's a much bigger issue. That's where zombies to me come from. I mean, you look at some of these people that are on that, and especially like a Xanax and stuff, you can just see the emptiness in people's eyes.
Yeah.
They're just like a shell walking from A to B to do, you know what I mean? It's just, I think those could be more where you get those types of, things. Because we had to put a black label on depression medications just for children now.
Yeah.
Because we were so giddy about that stuff, giving it to them at an earlier age to help them. And here it actually, causes a whole host of bigger issues.
Well, they call it full spectrum dominance. And so the full spectrum in this case could be anything from satanic, skunk or, chemically altered skunk to pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, that's the full spectrum dominance, right? You throw enough of that out there, and you will catch fish in a net, right? That's how it goes. And then then you get to pile on, however you want to pile on, and you move the energy accordingly. So there is a setup to some degree. It's a chemical setup. That's my feeling, and I would agree with you that the SSRIs are they're bad news. And you get these kids that are on Ritalin, from like the age of 11 or 12. I had a boy on my baseball team, not this last spring, but 2 springs ago, and he was on Ritalin and he was on antidepressants, and this kid was 11 years old. He was 11 years old, and I got to tell you, he was a basket case. One time before a game, he was huddled over in the corner of the dugout, and he just had tears streaming down his face. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, are you okay? And he just looks at me, he shakes his head, he says, I don't feel well. And I felt sorry for the kid.
Yeah,
I didn't know what was going on with him, but that was not an appropriate reaction before an 11-year-old baseball game. And eventually he kind of got it together, and he got in the game, and he was terrible that day. And I felt for him. So, what's this kid going to be like in 10 years? His brain isn't fully formed. His neurobiology is getting scrambled. Mm-hmm. And it's, here's another fish in the barrel, So
an interesting side story with it's funny you're on baseball. I played baseball all the way up until I hit high school because I moved. But I played down in a rec league in Georgia. And mm-hmm. me and my best friend at the time, he was diagnosed. He was one of the first, I won't say first, but he was a very early diagnosed ADHD case. Okay? He's one of the first guys, though, that gets put through like a year or two or more. It was crazy testing that you used to do back in those days.
Right.
And he went through all that, and he truly got diagnosed. And actually, based on a friend that I have today, I've actually come around on this particular discussion. Because I used to be like, nobody needs Ritalin. Nobody needs Ritalin. But based on this one individual at my work, 100%, there are a few individuals out there who absolutely are better. I think the majority are not. The majority of them are kids. That's all they are. Kids with energy. Okay?
Right.
My best friend, though, in Georgia playing baseball, he was ADHD, and his mom made him take his medication. The only thing was, she did not make him take it before a baseball game because he could not perform. And let me tell you something. Back in the South, there's a much more developed baseball program, at least. I don't know about the rest of the sports. Actually, yes, I do. There's a lot more sports development in the South. I was playing baseball, in the middle school at, 6th grade, 7th grade. Mm-hmm. We were on the all-star team together back there. And it was funny because he discovered the ADHD and Ritalin connection and not performing based on his first all-star game. He thought because he was going into the all-star game, he'd better take that medication so that he could focus better.
Right.
He had the worst game of his life that game.
Interesting.
And that's when he started to realize, okay, I can't take that or else I can't play. So it's interesting how you bring that up in baseball. Yeah,
well, there's about 35 or 40 major leaguers who have been grandfathered. Who have this new collective bargaining agreement, and a lot of it has to do with drugs, HGH, steroids. But there's about 35 or 40 Major League Baseball players who've been grandfathered into this agreement because they take Ritalin. And maybe they started when they were kids, but they're still taking Ritalin. And I think Tim Lincecum might be one of those guys. I'm not totally sure, but they're still doing it, and they're still taking it before baseball games. And I had a kid last year on my team who was taking Ritalin, and he stopped, and he was terrible. He was terrible, and his parents were trying to wean him off of Ritalin by giving him Red Bull.
Oh my gosh!
Which I thought was fascinating. And I'm like, okay, all right, kid, I just need you to show up and play.
Oh my God, prescription drug to Red Bull? Are you okay?
I'm totally serious. And so,
oh wow.
So I talked to the parents. They're nice people. And I said, so seemed like Hayden was a little tired today. Yeah, well, we gotta get him back on his Ritalin. We try to get him off, and that Red Bull's just not working.
Oh man.
Okay, there we go. So what's happening? What's next? Where are we going to go? What's the next event that we as Americans are going to have our attention jerked around with and have to deal with, and fend off our own sort of programming and our own predispositions, and cut through it all, use our laser beams, get above it, rise above it. What's the next one? Where's it going to happen? I don't know. Do you have any sense, Patrick?
You know what? I don't. I will say this, though. I was just having a conversation with some Army medic guys that I'm good friends with, and the whole Ebola thing is in the background to everything.
Yeah, that's right. That's the noise. Yep.
So, and the funny thing was, we were talking about that because I made a joke about reading something, and I read that Plan A was martial law and Plan B was Ebola. Mm-hmm. Okay? And one of my buddies was like, well, wait a second, though. If Ebola had an outbreak, like truly, like it does go virulent and it just goes, which I'm not buying into this hype. That's just me. Right. But if it happened, then martial law would actually stop the transmission of it. Mm-hmm. in a backwards kind of way.
Yeah.
So I would think, if anything, they're probably going to try and, between the ISIS thing, I mean, given the ISIS threat that's, being pushed, I think they're going to try and probably pull another, I wouldn't call it Boston or even 9/11, but a hybrid of the last, between Boston, 9/11, and St. Louis, maybe. A hybrid of those three.
It seems like that.
To connect it. They got to synthesize this stuff. The dialectic, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it seems like that's what we're being primed for.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I mean. All the predictive programming and kind of front loading everything is sort of, dancing around that. And then we've got this ice challenge.
Oh, I wanted to say something about that. Have you seen that? That picture that's floating on the internet that has a picture of a bunch of people putting ice bucket challenge, and then below that they have a picture of the heading of that guy from ISIS, and it says
right.
Ice Us, and then Ice Us. Yeah. Did you see that?
I haven't seen that, but I've made the connection between the two.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's very strange stuff. And, of course, what is ice? It is frozen water, and when we talk about water, in terms of invocating astrological symbols, we talk about Pisces and Neptune, and Chiron. Chiron is the wound. It's the wounded healer, so it's wounded water, and it's ALS. It's nervous system. A lot of athletes. It started with athletes. So it's a Uranus and Aries social media phenomena, Chiron and Pisces. And by the way, Chiron and Uranus were at the same degree the other day at the height of this ice bucket challenge. So it's interesting from that angle as well. We live in a strange universe, man. It's just getting stranger all the time.
Oh, it's surreal. It's surreal. How everything's connected, how one thing, like something like you're talking about, like with the ice bucket challenge and ISIS and the, I don't think of the word, like the reflection of each, but it's not a true reflection. It's like at 90 degrees. It's like square. It's like a squared reflection, if you will.
It is a squared reflection, yeah. Strange
One thing I want to point out, too, though, on these stories that do get pumped out there, one thing you may have read, you've probably known about this, and I think a lot of other people do. They've always said that, they have to communicate their intentions before they do it. It's like an esoteric law.
That's right.
Well, if you read most of the stories, though, that happen even in your local or especially at the national level, there are so many numbers that stand out. The numerology that these guys play with, to kind of, in my opinion, if you're paying attention, you can just see it. Like 9/11, they'll use numbers, they'll use big numbers, but when you break them down and you just add them all together, you'll literally get 9/11 all the time in the fake stories.
Right.
And it's just standing there.
Yep.
And it's like, to me, it's a key giveaway. Okay, I don't have to pay attention to this much more.
Mm-hmm.
But there's things like that, 33, and I mean, they play with numbers like crazy.
Well, this year's been 7. It's been a big 7 year.
Yes.
So
that's really weird you brought that up too, because I was just reading about Albert Pike in the Masonry or what's Freemasons he was with, and he was talking about, it was this thing about how he didn't understand sevens in esoteric lore.
So we have been interrupted here by some kind of local crisis.
I was wondering what this is.
Maybe we're at the next thing. Maybe it's the next. Wow, that was.
Well, hey, let's go. Yeah.
Huh? Wow.
What's that symbolic of here? Come on, what just happened out there in the world?
What were you talking about?
Albert Pike and the Freemasons and the number 7.
Right.
Because you were saying there's a lot of 7s this year, and yeah, I just happened to read something today. It was reading Muriev Boris, I believe his name is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I just came across this name a week ago, and I've been digging. He's got a series called Gnosis.
Mm-hmm.
It's about exoteric Christianity, the Eastern Orthodox version, not the Roman Catholic one. Doing research and reading that book and looking about him, I came across a passage about Albert Pike and how he was talking about he didn't understand at 32nd or 33 level of Freemasonry. He didn't understand the connection between 7 and like all these different planets. And wow.
There it goes again, man.
Is that a fire alarm?
This is a complex emergency alarm. This is not.
Oh, it's not your personal fire alarm.
No, this is not a personal thing. So whatever is happening here in the complex is it's a collective event. Let's put it that way.
Isn't it all? Now?
It's not a personal event. Well, interesting stuff. So we're coming up on 8/25, and I had circled that on my astrological calendar because of the conjunction between Mars and Saturn, and it's a pretty powerful conjunction. That's going to happen on the 25th, and that's at 20 degrees. So I think we want to keep our eyes on this Mars-Saturn conjunction in the next 3 days. So let's do the numerology for it. So 2 + 5 is 7. So you get the 7 on the day. The 8th month, so that's going to be 15. That's 6. And this is 2014, so that is
7.
That's a 7, so it's a 6 and a 7, so it's a 13. It's a 13 number, so that's a powerful number. So it's the number of the death card in the major tarot, in the major arcana in the tarot. And it also would indicate the 13th sign, which would be Ophiuchus, because of course there are 12 signs in Western astrology, but theoretically 13 constellations and 13 signs, and you would find that in sidereal astrology. And I got into this on that show that I was on with Greg Carlwood, and talking about the possibility that the elite are running their programs off of sidereal astrology, and meanwhile we're on the Western mundane version, which could also indicate the separation of these two different worlds that you're talking about. I just threw that out there as a possibility. Yeah,
that actually ties into the 13 moon calendar or whatever.
Yeah,
I got into the Hebrew. Have you heard of the Chronicle Project guys up in Canada?
No.
Okay, so allegedly there's these guys. It's the younger group. I think they're in their mid-late 20s, maybe the early 30s. They're Jews, and they got really frustrated by all of the naming, the way you have to interpret Hebrew words. Now, all these rules for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they started fresh, so to speak, and basically said, what if that's not true? And they have an entire system that they claim is already there for you to find. They call it self-defining Hebrew. They came into it under the impression that if the Creator truly handed down his law or his story or his grant to us, if you want to look at it like that, then the language used would be divine. That was their starting point. And what they found was the very first glyph of the Hebrew language contained the next two. And the next two contained the next three. And each of them talked to each other. And ultimately they reread not all the books because they had to relearn first. But they're reinterpreting the old Hebrew books. And what they're finding is very interesting. And in that, it talks about the Creator will know his people by the calendar that they use. And he goes into the whole moon calendar and keeping the Sabbath to the moon and the crescents. And I've known about this at least for a while doing other research years ago. I didn't really know there were other calendars or there were, different systems.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But it comes down to instead of 12, it's 13. And when you get into math and the way the 360 works, 13 actually is a lot more harmonic than 12 is. Even though it seems like 12 would be a more solid number, you add it to 3 being the Trinity. I mean, there's a lot of power in that number. But 13 actually seems more harmonious, which is really interesting.
So it is interesting. I mean, this is what Jose Arguelles talked about at great length with his calendar, his version of the Mayan calendar. You get 13 months, and you get 20 days per month, and you get your 360 days, and you've got the perfect circle. Of course, we had to theoretically account for missing time and the extra 5 days, and so it threw a lot of things off. But I think the 25th is a day, we should, not give a lot of energy to, but be open in terms of the.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, all right.
One thing that connecting that together really fast, from what it said, from what they found, was that we're supposed to be using the sun for the daily cycle. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
But for the bigger cycle, if you will, the long wave cycle, it's supposed to be based on the moon.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So we flip-flop, basically. Actually,
right.
we deified and elevated, the sun into the ultimate position.
Right, and that gets into the, the whole relationship between the patriarchy and the matriarchy, and masculine and the feminine, and it's a big piece. And maybe if we could integrate the two, we'd be balanced, and we'd be honoring the masculine and the feminine, and nobody gets shortchanged in the exchange program there. Speaking of moon, it's going to be a new moon coming up here in Virgo, with the sun in Virgo. So that's going to be, it's over the weekends.
That's perfectionism too, isn't for Virgo? I got my moon in Virgo.
Well, it's a great, people that, if you want to go on a fast, or you want to get into a cleanse, this would be the weekend to start it. This would be the weekend to start your cleanse, or start your fast, because we're dealing with two levels of purification. We're dealing with the mind and the body and the emotions. So, if you have been putting off doing that, you will have the power of intention behind you this weekend, and you could get involved in a supercharged detoxification. And then 2 weeks out, when we have the full moon in Pisces, and you would literally refill your body with good stuff, whatever that is.
Spiritual waters.
There you go. Yeah. All right, my man. Well, listen, have a good weekend. Enjoy your Virgo moon.
Thank you.
And,
it's been a pleasure, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, you're welcome. It's good to hear from you. And stay cool back there in Ferguson. It sounds like things are chilling out a little bit, and appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
Not a problem. Enjoy your weekend, too.
All right. That's Patrick, the money guy. He's been on here before, and we had a great little exchange here with Robert Bonomo and Patrick. That was about 4 months ago, and that was a really good show. So thank you for Patrick coming on. One of the things I did want to mention, which I did not talk about while the two of us were on the air, was I had a conversation with somebody who knew someone who was close to Darren Wilson's wife, and it came out in that conversation that Darren Wilson had indeed been bum rushed by Michael Brown and had to literally fight for his life. This coming from Darren Wilson's wife, by the way. So take it for what it's worth. I'm just passing along. I'm just the messenger. Speaking of the message, this weekend, actually tomorrow, in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, it's interesting. We've been dealing with Robin Williams, Darren Wilson, and Williamsport. Williamsport, Pennsylvania is where the Little League World Series is being held, and they're down to 4 teams now. And the storylines, if you're looking for storylines, are great. They're significant. On Saturday, Japan will be playing South Korea again. They played each other once. South Korea beat them. And Japan is not a team that loses a lot during the Little League World Series. And, of course, classically, these are two countries that don't like each other very much. There is bad blood between Japan and Korea. And so we have this game being played on a very large stage tomorrow taking place. The second game is Chicago versus Las Vegas. So we were just talking about Chicago and talking about how people were bussed in from Chicago to be protesters during this standoff, so to speak, in Ferguson. Chicago has a very talented Little League team. They're called Jackie Robinson West, and they are all African-American kids. And I think it's great that they're in the Little League World Series. I think it's great that baseball is coming back, hopefully to urban America, because the numbers of African-Americans playing Major League Baseball is down. And there's a great legacy of players, from Willie Mays to Hank Aaron to Willie Stargell to Bob Gibson. And they're just not there anymore. They've decided in the inner cities to play basketball or to play football, mostly basketball, and that's where the energy has gone. So baseball has lost the potential of having a lot of fantastic players. So we have Chicago West coming in, and the only game that they have lost so far is to the Las Vegas team. and the Las Vegas team is pretty much all Caucasian. So you have an all Caucasian team versus an all African American, all black team. It's going to be a story, especially on the heels of Ferguson. Unfortunately, these kids are going to be put into a political crosshairs. And we saw a little bit with Monet Davis, who was the pitcher for the Tanny Philadelphia team, and she happened to be both a girl and an African American. She became the World Series. She was the face of the World Series, and she's a very good story and a good player. And I wish Monet all the best in her life. She seems like a great kid. But unfortunately, these events now, even at a young age, are becoming politicized. It's no longer just about baseball. There has to be some kind of social narrative. Number one, because ESPN sells, it sells. The stories sell. Baseball alone probably just doesn't sell. Baseball with the narrative sells. And so they're going to find those storylines. They're going to punch them, and they're going to punch the volume on them. So anyway, that's happening tomorrow. And then the winner will play on Sunday. So it's going to be interesting. I know I will be watching, since I'm a baseball guy, but I'm also apparently going to be coaching baseball this fall again. So I'll keep you posted with how that goes here in Texas. Other than that, I think we're all pretty much intact. Our molecules are still cohering to our bodies, and we're still doing our best to find truth in this world, a light through the darkness, which is kind of where we all are. And hopefully what we can do is we can climb the ladder together, that we aspire together, that none of us get left behind. Using the Christian adage for the rapture, none of us get left behind. But in order to do that, we need to talk. We need to communicate. We need to look over each other's fence and say, what's going on over there? And we need to do it in a way that's respectful. And we need to understand that there are forces in this world that are conspiring against us. It's just the way it is. And maybe the biggest conspiracy of all is that it's a conspiracy to awaken, to wake us up. At the end of the day, thank you very much. You're playing your role, and at some point in time, your role will be over. It will be over. And then the rest of us have to, take our lives and live it to the best of our abilities from a heightened perspective, from an awakened perspective. But we're still, we're still in the process of awakening. We're still in the Kali Yuga, the realm of illusion, Maya, samsara. We're coming out of it. And with each day, with each moment where clarity and truth reign supreme, we get closer and closer to that day. So hopefully we can look across from each other and see each other as one. That's where it's at. That's just we can't undo time. We can't undo the social condition. We are who we are. We're living with who we're living with. And hopefully we can take it to another level. All right, that's it. I'll be back on Monday with 11th House Radio, and I guess it'll be the 25th of August. So we'll have a real-time show with the Saturn-Mars conjunction. Don't miss it. Maybe absolutely nothing will happen. Wouldn't that be great? But if it does, I'll be here, and we'll be talking about it, and we'll be looking at what goes down over the weekends. So thank you, everybody. I want to do some shout-outs before I sign off here. First of all, I want to thank Raul for donating to the show. This is the second time you've donated. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. This is not a subscription-based model. I don't have any sponsors. Hopefully at some point in time that will change and we can, begin to derive some income out of this. But I don't. So I do depend on efforts from people to donate and support the show. And Raul, thank you for doing that. I want to publicly acknowledge you. I also want to give a shout out to my buddy Paul, the Fisher King. I hope everything is going well with you and that you are put back together nicely and that your next evolutionary spiral is enlightening and empowering more than anything else. And best wishes and Godspeed with your healing. And a special shout out to Mr. Less Visible. It is his birthday today, August 22nd. And I hope this new solar cycle for you is life-affirming, Viz. And hope to get you back on the show one of these days. And lastly, I'm going to say a shout-out to she was my first wife, Susan. Susan, happy birthday. I know you don't listen to the show. I mean, I don't even know where you are, but I know it's your birthday, and you're an important person in my life for a number of years, and I wish you all the well, and I hope your life is unfolding gracefully and the way that you want it and envision it. That's it. We've reached the end of the show. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stable what's possible. Thanks again to Patrick, the finance guy, the money guy, for giving us some on-the-ground observations from Ferguson. This is Robert Phoenix. I'll be back on Monday on the 25th of August, your Mars-Saturn conjunction show in the 11th house. I'll see you then.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.